Okay, today I want to introduce our guest. She's a certified health coach and founder of Saad Wellness, where she helps women with ADHD get their lives back on track mentally, physically, emotionally through diet, mindset work, and time management techniques. I am so excited to have this conversation today. The connection between gut health and brain health is fascinating to me. So, Saad, welcome to Do the Work.
Thank you. Thank you. How's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Remind us where you're coming from today.
So I live in Medellin, Colombia.
I love that.
I was born in the US, but I was traveling and I came here and I loved it and I stayed.
That's awesome. Remind me of how you got to Colombia again.
I rode here on a bicycle from the
I
US.
love that story. I just think that that's absolutely awesome. Did you like go through Mexico and then down? Okay. Okay. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
the whole
That's
thing.
quite, how long did it take you?
It took us a year and 4 months. The funny thing is, people hear that I did that and they're like, "You must be so athletic." At the time, I really was not.
That is quite the commitment then. It's like running a marathon by just like, oh, I casually jog.
Exactly. So it was very slow, very bit by bit. And we did cheat once. We took a boat to skip the Darien Gap because that's really dangerous. So we
Well,
cheated a little bit.
that's okay. I think you earned your stripes. So I want to get into today's topic. First, I want to hear a little bit about your story, how you got into the world of wellness, what kind of pushed you in this direction.
For sure. So my story, I think like a lot of people, it started from a personal angle. And it was very much an accident. I had struggled with my weight my whole life. I was fat, I was thin, I was fat, I was thin. I did my first diet when I was 6 because I thought it was cool because my mom was doing
Oh
it. So I was like,
yeah.
oh, I want to be like mom. I want to do a diet. I remember sitting with my friend and being like, you can have this much of this and this much because we thought we were so
Yes.
cool and so grown up because we were doing a diet. We were on a diet. And so, I was a kid then, but as I got older, it just was this constant stress about food. Um, and then when I was in college, I studied acting and business, but I wanted to be an actress. So there was that pressure to, you have to be thin, you have to be
For
thin.
sure.
And so I was just so nervous about everything. And then later I quit acting, but I still had this real problem just always being stressed about food all the time. Just like everything I would eat would be like, is this the one? Like, is this the donut that's gonna put me over the edge?
Yes.
And I would eat healthy and then unhealthy, and I just felt totally out of control. I think a lot of people have felt the same.
For sure.
Yeah. And so then I randomly happened upon the ketogenic diet. I think it popped up in my YouTube feed. I don't even know. And so I was like, oh, what is this? Let's try this. And I tried it and I decided to really go all in. And then I magically I lost exactly 50 pounds in
Wow.
just over 3 months like that. It was almost too fast. I remember I hit my goal weight, I surpassed my goal weight, and I said, well, that
You're
sucks. I
like,
want to
hold
stay on the
on.
diet. I want to keep working on this because it's enjoyable. The food's good. And I was no longer stressed about food, which
Hmm.
was great. And also, a really random thing happened, which is, I have ADHD, and the symptom that's always been the worst for me has been my procrastination. And people think, well, what do you mean? Just do it. And that's what I was thinking about. Well, just do it, just do it, just do it. What's wrong with
Hmm.
you? Why can't you do it? Why? And when I say it was really out of control, I mean, when I did my master's, I had to do a thesis, obviously, and I would sit at the computer, at 3 p.m., and I wouldn't be able to start until 2 a.m.
Woo.
until I was completely exhausted. There are various reasons why that might be, but one of the main theories is that, like, when you have ADHD, sometimes you need to exhaust your brain first. So
Okay.
before it can work, that's one theory. Another theory is that in general, we sometimes just have problems with task initiation. So that could be another thing. And then you're just kind of stressed out because you're always living in this like dysfunctional universe. So I always had problems with procrastination, like out of control, and it really affected my self-esteem. I wanted to go to a really good college. I'm
Mm.
one of those that actually had good grades in high school, but I couldn't do the application, couldn't sit down and do it. So I didn't go to the super fancy college I wanted to go to. I went to one near my house. Okay, fine. It was a good school, but it wasn't, Harvard.
For
so,
sure. Yeah.
so things like that. And so as I was doing this diet, I was working as an English teacher online. And so Monday through Friday, I had no problem getting to classes teaching, but Sunday was lesson planning day. And I hated that day.
You had to sit down and like do the work.
Yeah, exactly, like the name of the podcast. So I had to sit down, I had to plan it. It was an unstructured kind of thing. And so every single Sunday, I would wake up early and I just wouldn't do it. And it would be 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 2 p.m., 4 p.m. And my
That's a
husband's going,
cycle.
oh my God, it was horrible. And my husband's going, are we going to do something? No, I'm working. He's like, you're not working. And
If you're
so
not going to work, let's go do something.
exactly. And then, then the end of the day rolls around, the sun goes down. I finally wear myself out enough, get it done, usually before too late, but sometimes, wound up staying up late. So every week I began the week tired,
That's tough.
pissed off. And I tried everything, setting timers, this, that, and the other, all the hacks, the
All the
tips and the
habits. Yep.
tricks, nothing. And, I went on medication again. I had been diagnosed at age 35. I'm 42 now. I
Okay.
tried going on medication again, and that was a mess. It gave me headaches. And then I would do my lesson planning, but instead of, making like a 3 or 4 page plan for my student, it would be 50, 60, 70 pages.
We went
And
overboard. One extreme or the other.
the students were like, this is for the whole year. I'm like, no, this is for one class. We're going to do it. And they're like, no,
No, we're
stop.
not.
And I couldn't stop. And I couldn't turn myself off. So it was like the other extreme. And I felt weird. I was feeling panicky, so the medication for me wasn't an option. So then, going fast forward to, after, I don't know how long, maybe about a month on keto, I want to say. One Sunday, the dreaded Sunday,
Oh, yeah.
I woke up around 7, made my coffee, sat down, opened my laptop, unceremoniously started working, and finished my lesson planning by 10 a.m.
You were like, what is going on? Hold on.
I was like, that's weird. Okay, because that was literally the first time in my life that I had sat down to do
Wow.
something without it being a deadline, the last minute, or somebody standing over my shoulder, because the pressure
Mm-hmm.
can kick you into it too. Kick you into focus. And I said, okay, that's weird. That's not going to happen again. The next Sunday, got up, made my coffee, sat down, did my lesson planning again and again. And I said, what the hell is going on?
Mm-hmm.
And so my biggest symptom of ADHD basically disappeared. And so that was a kind of a real eye opener for me. I said, okay, is this because I'm on this, ketogenic diet? So I started Googling, and I found not a ton of research, but I did find a decent amount of research to support the fact that, yes, a ketogenic diet can help with ADHD and
Interesting.
many, many other mental conditions. So here I am, and I'm trying to spread the word.
Wow, that's honestly awesome. So, can you kind of explain to us what the ketogenic diet is first and foremost? I know I hear about it all the time. It's everywhere. It's one of the main diets that people talk about, but I think people kind of get confused about the difference between keto and other types of diets that are out there. So, what does keto look like?
So there are actually various various variations. There are many variations on the diet. The diet's over 100 years old. It was created originally as a treatment for epilepsy.
Oh,
So
wow.
epilepsy has been around for a long time, and you can see even reports going all the way back to Hippocrates of people with epilepsy needing to be treated. And so back in the days of Hippocrates, they treated it with fasting, and they found that it worked. So, fast forward to today, we know that fasting can help, not everybody, but it does help a big chunk of people with seizures reduce or sometimes eliminate their seizures. But
Wow.
what are you going to do with a little kid? Say, like, yeah, sorry, kid, don't eat for the next 5 months.
Exactly. Doesn't
So,
work.
right, exactly. So we can't just fast people forever, especially little kids. So 100 years or so ago, just over 100 years ago, they came up with a diet that mimics fasting in the brain. So it mimics the effects of fasting. And so what it is, it's a very high fat, moderate protein, low carb diet.
Okay.
And it mimics the effects of fasting in the brain. And I'll also go so far as to say it mimics the way we ate pre-farming time, because we used to eat these big animals. We used to eat their brains. We used to eat their bones, and the
Mhm.
inside of their bone is mainly fat. If you eat bone marrow, so it not only mimics fasting, but it, in my opinion, really mimics the way we used to eat before farming came into our lives. Um, and so you'll hear all different ratios, numbers, this, that, and the other. So it's really up to you which one you want to try. Classic keto is 90% calories from fat. So it's pretty intense. And there's research coming out now saying that maybe we don't need to go that
I mean, that's a
crazy.
lot. I mean,
That-
that's yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So when you have a diet like that, you're talking about like some meat, but like a vial of olive oil. You know what I mean? You're really adding as much fat as you
Wow.
can, because it's very hard to get that kind of naturally. So that's a 90% calories from fat, and then 6% protein, 4% carbs. That's like classic keto. That's a very extreme version. And like I said, might be overkill. So there's that. There's a modified keto with all kinds of different ratios. And then there's even something called a modified Atkins diet, which would probably be the most relaxed version.
I've heard
It's
of Atkins before. Yeah. My mom
mhm.
used to talk about Atkins a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny because sometimes you hear these things that are kind of old things that have been kind of rebranded. And so modified Atkins is very similar to keto. It's just a little bit more protein. It's still very low carb. It's just a little bit more protein. So
Okay.
studies are coming out saying that that actually might be enough. So when I work with people, I tell them, listen, this is the extreme version that this has been studied a lot. This is the kind of not so extreme version that looks like it's doing well. So let's try to do something kind of in the middle.
Okay.
So that's what
Okay.
I usually recommend.
I feel like that's probably best too when it comes to people starting a diet and being able to keep up with it. It has to be functional within like their day-to-day lives. If it's too much of a barrier to entry or too hard to keep up with, it's so easy to fall off track with.
Mhm.
So that middle of the road probably sounds a lot more doable than the super extreme version.
Mhm. Yeah, the super extreme is hard. Even I've tried to do it just for fun, and I'm like, oh no,
You're like,
this
this
is
is a lot.
this is really hard. You're eating like sticks of butter. It's. I mean, I do that now, but
Sticks of
you're eating lots
butter.
of sticks of butter.
Okay, okay. I wanna
Um,
get into that, sticks of
mhm.
butter, I wanna hear about that. So let's talk about ADHD for a second.
Mm,
So you said that you were diagnosed at 35.
mm,
That's late, is it not? I hear
mm,
most of the time, I feel like I hear about ADHD with kids, like young kids
um,
not being able to sit still, running around too much, like
um.
not able to focus in the classroom. So what did that look like for you leading up to 35, getting diagnosed? What'd that look like?
Yeah, well, it's quite funny, and one of the reasons I didn't get diagnosed is I did really well in school when I was younger. I was valedictorian in 6th grade.
I love
um,
that.
I was captain of the math team, so I was doing well. I was getting the grades. But here's what's going on. So here I am in class. If it's a lecture, I'm just doodling, 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 and doodling, and doodling, and doodling. And no teacher ever scolded me. And to be frank, I actually wanted them to scold me because I was flagrantly ignoring them, like doo doo doo. So I was just doodling, 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 doodling. Then we would have study hall during class. You're
Mhm.
supposed to do your homework. Couldn't. I was just looking at people. I would write a poem. I would do anything except my homework. Then I would go home. Um, Watch TV for 3 hours, play guitar, write a poem, practice like a monologue, whatever. Everything except my homework. Then when I was tired, I would do my homework and teach myself everything that I didn't pay attention to in class. So I was doing like double, triple the
Double.
work
Mhm.
while being exhausted. I couldn't get up in the mornings to save my life. Every morning was this like big fight with me and my parents. This is when I'm a little, like when I was a little kid. And so I wasn't, running around, but I was, fidgeting, playing with my hair, doodling, that kind of stuff, and daydreaming big time. So I have what's called combined type ADHD. So I'm inattentive. So I'm, on my own planet, and I'm also hyperactive. So
Okay.
I like to move around. And so a lot of times it doesn't get caught in some people, and they're saying especially girls. I want to read more about the research, but a lot of times girls, who knows why, if it's a natural thing or if it's because we're socialized to be, good. Um,
Calmer.
yeah, right. Be nice.
Be a
Don't make
little
it.
calmer, just be a
Yeah,
little quieter.
right.
Yeah.
Don't disrupt the class.
Yes.
So you'll tend to see a lot of times girls, instead of running around, really disrupting the class, they might, be playing with something on their desk, or be maybe sending notes to their friends, or things like that. So they're not going to get in trouble so much. And so that's why it doesn't always get caught as much in girls. But this also happens in boys too. There are some boys that they're not jumping off the walls. They're just kind of doing their thing.
For
you know
sure.
and so, yeah, it is something that adults can have too. Usually, it's something that you have since childhood. So you can be diagnosed at a very young age, but I would say a lot of people tend to see symptoms. For a lot of people, it's when they start getting homework. That's when a lot of people can
When
see
they really
symptoms.
have to focus and sit down and do the task. That makes sense. That makes sense.
And then for older people, sometimes it's when you have a big life change. So maybe you did okay in high school, especially if like your parents were helping you cook, or somebody was helping you clean, or you didn't have that much responsibility. And then suddenly you go to college and you have to do everything. You have to cook, you have to clean, you have to do your homework, you have to go to class, and you have your friends, and you're in love with somebody, and da 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 da. You know
It's
what I
too
mean?
much.
And then it's just too much. So going to college could be a time when you might say, okay, what's going on? Or having a baby sometimes, or having a baby and then going back to work, and then it's like too much. So things like that. So these kind of major life changes can be times that people are diagnosed.
Very interesting. Did you ever take medication for it?
Yeah, I did. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I got diagnosed at 35 by my friends. Um,
Okay. Okay.
so the backstory to that is, I went to therapy many times when I was a kid, for various things, and I was diagnosed. I was misdiagnosed with bipolar. I was misdiagnosed with major depression, and I was misdiagnosed with anxiety. And this is quite common. A lot of people that have ADHD are
Wow.
actually misdiagnosed. It's almost like there's this kind of menu, like that
Which one
the
fits? Yeah.
yeah, that like psychiatrists look for, and it's like this, and then on the dessert menu, it's like ADHD.
Interesting. Okay.
So we start to get missed because they're like, oh, you're crying, you must be depressed, or you look nervous, you must be anxious, and it's actually ADHD. Sometimes it's more. Sometimes you can have more than one, but sometimes it gets overlooked. So that's what happened to me. I got put on antidepressants. It literally did nothing because I was not depressed.
Makes
But
sense.
put on anti-anxiety medicine, which literally did nothing because I was not anxious, and all this stuff. And then later, when I was in my mid 30s, my friends were like, "You think you might have ADHD?" And I was like, "No." And other friends later were like, "Oh, I thought you already knew you had ADHD." So,
I didn't think
um,
we were sharing any news here.
right. And I was like, "No, I don't have that. I don't have a problem focusing." And I didn't. I can focus on anything, just not necessarily the thing I want to focus on. You know? I don't have the, and that's why I never even thought of it, because I'd heard of it, obviously, but I
Mhm.
never had this feeling of like, "Oh, I can't focus." I just had this feeling of like, "Oh, let's write a poem." "But you should do your homework." "Nah,
Okay,
poem."
that makes sense. Okay, okay.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that, or, usually I can pay really good attention in conversations because people are fascinating to me, but, occasionally it's like someone's talking to you and you start thinking, "Oh, I wonder what I should have for lunch." Just, and so I'm focused on
Your
that.
mind's your mind's in other places from where it's
Mhm.
supposed to be.
Mhm,
Okay, that
but
makes
it's not,
sense.
yeah, but for me, it's not this feeling of, like, fogginess, like, I can't, no, I can, it's not the right thing maybe.
Okay, that's
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and so when I, got diagnosed, my friends kept saying it, I was like, "No, I don't have it, I don't have it, I don't have it, I don't have it." A friend of mine got diagnosed, I was like, "Well, good for you, I don't have it." And then in the most ADHD of fashions, I was walking down the street in Brooklyn where I used to live, and somebody had left a box of books that they didn't want on the sidewalk. So I was like, "Ooh, free books." I started looking through them, and there was a book about ADHD. And I was like, well, whatever, it's free. Let's take it." And so I took it home. I started reading it, and I said, "Oh,
You're like,
okay."
I'm that, and I'm that, and I'm that. Hmm.
I was like, "Okay." Um, and so then I decided to go to therapy, and because I have ADHD, I went, signed up for therapy, and forgot to tell her.
That you think you have ADHD.
And guess how long it took me before I remembered?
How long?
6 months.
You were in therapy for 6 months and didn't tell her. Oh my gosh. What'd your therapist say?
Well, actually, we wound up doing cognitive behavioral therapy. which was very helpful with my like self-talk, but did nothing for my ADHD.
Mhm.
And I remember even kind of being mad at my therapist because I was saying like, yo, I have this horrible procrastination problem. I can't, physically get into the office, this, that, and the other. And she was like, well, what if you give yourself a reward afterwards? And I was like, okay, I'll try. It didn't work. Um,
Like, I still have to get there and be doing the thing.
yeah, it just didn't work. Like this idea of, ooh, in 5 hours, I will get this treat. It didn't work for me. So finally I told her, hey, I think I have ADHD. And she goes, I don't think you do. I go, oh, why? She goes, well, you make really good eye contact. And I go, but I'm forcing myself to do that because I know that it's rude to, you know,
For
um,
sure.
all I really wanted to do was look at like her books that were behind her. But
You're
I
like,
was like,
"No,
"Eh."
I need to make eye contact."
I didn't want to be rude. And so she's like, okay, well, I'll give you a questionnaire to fill out. So let's see. So I filled it out. It was, I think it was like 13 questions. I answered yes to 12. She was like, okay, yeah, that looks like ADHD. Let's send you to a psychiatrist. And so she gave me a prescription. And the first time I took it, it was insane. I breathed out a breath that I felt like I'd been holding in for 30 something years.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this is amazing. I cleaned the whole house. I sat down and did Photoshop because I was working as a photographer at the time. I was like, okay, yeah, do this. My husband came at the time, my ex-husband came home and I was like, look, I did all this stuff. And he was like, whoa, you look kind of like,
He was like, "Let's calm down.
yeah.
What's going on?"
Yeah. And so then the next day I woke up and I had the worst headache I've ever had in my life. Okay. Like it was weird. It felt like there were zaps going on inside my head. And I thought, okay, wow, is this how it's always going to be? So I continued, with the medication on and off here and there. I was afraid to take it on days that I was taking photos because
Okay.
I wanted my real brain. I was really good at taking photos. I was really bad at retouching, sitting down to retouch. So I was on the medication here and there. And then is right then, maybe about a month or so after getting the medication is when we started the bike trip. Um, yeah,
Okay.
and I had asked my psychiatrist, hey, can I take this while I'm doing this crazy bike trip? And she's like, I don't know if that's a good idea. You're going to be, hot, dehydrated, this, that, and the other. So I kept this bottle with me. I still have it. 6 years later, it's totally expired. Six, probably 7 or 8 now. Yeah, but 8 years later, it's totally expired. Bottle of Adderall that I didn't really use. And then here in Colombia, I went on Vyvanse because I don't have Adderall
Mhm.
here, and I hated it. It made me feel like something is wrong. Something's wrong. Like something's off in me.
Okay.
And when I first started talking about ADHD and stuff, I was of this attitude of like, you know what, medicine is fine. You know what, if it's working for you, fine. I think it's crap. Sorry, I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
It for me. It's too many side effects, and I hear people complaining about it all the time, and I don't hear anyone that says, "Oh, it's perfect. I don't have any complaints." So I think that it's important to keep it in mind. Yeah, maybe some people really do need it, but maybe not.
But maybe not. And that's the thing is I feel like we so often are just fed one narrative that we don't even know that there are other options out there to consider. And when you're fed that one narrative for so long, it's the easiest route, the route of least resistance. So you just go in that direction and you kind of suck it up with whatever those side effects may be, because this is what you've been told is the best option. So is that what led you to start researching keto, and or was there something that happened in between there? Was keto like your first alternative therapy for ADHD?
Well, when I did it, I had no idea it was going to do that. I just wanted to look cute in crop tops.
Oh, you did it. Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay. This was just a side effect of the
yeah.
diet. You okay,
I
okay.
had no idea. I had no idea. I was a English teacher working online. I had no idea. I've always been interested in nutrition, but I
That's
didn't.
honestly like such an awesome oopsie.
Yeah, it was so dramatic too. But like you hear this stuff like, oh, take fish oil, and then people take it, and okay, maybe that's going to help you a little bit, but it's not going to be this big dramatic thing. And so that's why people just, I think, kind of give up on it because if it's something kind of, take this little supplement, do this, it's not going to do anything.
Mhm.
But something like a ketogenic diet, the people that try it, not everyone is like, cured. I would say my ADHD is 90, 95% reduced. I'm still fidgety. I'm still a little hyper, but it's not
You
like
can
it was before.
function.
Yeah, I can function and the procrastination is gone. That's really the thing that was driving me insane. The procrastination, this constant feeling of stress is gone. I don't think I have social anxiety, but when I
Mhm.
would go to parties, I would just kind of be like nervous, and I don't know, I don't consider myself shy. I don't know if it was just too much to
Kinda, like,
take
felt like you were
in.
vibrating all the time, like, there's just so much, like, yeah,
Yeah, so and now I
makes
go to
sense.
parties and I can feel myself like breathing, like, okay, like
For
whereas before I
sure.
think I was holding my breath. Um, and my moods are much more stable. There's a thing called emotional dysregulation, which is very common in ADHD, and a lot of people don't know that. They think it's just an attention thing. There's actually an emotional roller coaster going on. You can have these larger than life emotions. It could be somebody says something that makes you angry, and instead of being angry, you're like nuclear level angry.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
did not know that. I did not know that about ADHD.
yeah, and that's actually what causes a lot of problems in people's lives.
Mhm.
The attention thing can definitely cause a problem, but if you, let's say, you space out a little bit at work, okay, hopefully eventually you'll get your work done. But if you have a fight with your coworker, you're probably going to get fired. So that also tends to be something that can really throw us off. But since changing my diet, I mean, I'm still a little dramatic, but I don't have these crazy fights all the time. It's usually with the people that are closest to you. Tends to be what I hear a lot is that, oh yeah, I don't really fight with, whatever, the woman at the restaurant.
Random,
Yeah,
yeah.
the waitress. I don't really fight with the waitress, but I fight with my husband, or I fight with my kids, or I fight with my whatever sister. I don't fight with my husband so much anymore, which is great. I hope he doesn't hear this.
We love that. We love that.
It was really dysfunctional. We got married during the pandemic, so we had some pretty amazing fights because we had nothing
Mhm.
else to do.
On top of each other,
Yeah.
24/7. No, I really resonate with the connection between diet and what's happening in your brain. I've never done the keto diet. My mom swears by the keto diet. My best friend does keto, not for ADHD, but they just says it's the best diet that's ever worked for them. But when I started this year doing my whole health and wellness journey, it really started because I was dealing with depression so heavily last year. And I feel like I, just like you, I had tried all of the different little hacks and the mindsets and the habits and doing the little type of work and like reading the books and the therapy. And I'm like, nothing is working. Like, what is going
Yeah.
on? I feel like I can't get control of this. And I kept reading so much about the connection between your gut and your brain and like how much they talk to each other. And I was like, all right, I've never tried diet as a potential solution to this problem. Anytime I've ever done a diet, it's been strictly for weight loss. I've never even considered it for my mood at all. I did the Whole 30 diet, which is cuts out inflammatory any food that is known to cause inflammation in the body. You cut it out and then you slowly re-enter it and see how it affects your body. That's essentially what that diet is. It worked almost immediately. I remember that first week being done with Whole 30 and I was like, what is going on? I feel so good. And it was like you're talking about it. It has to be that aha moment and people are like, hold on. This
Mhm.
is this is what people are talking about with this is like a life-changing
Mhm.
choice that I just made to change up my diet. And I would have never thought that changing my diet would have this much of an effect on what was going on in my brain. And just like you, I had tried medication, I had done all of those different things. And that's why I find this topic so fascinating because it's not just helps with depression, it helps with ADHD, it helps with epilepsy, it helps with anxiety, like a plethora of mental health disorders that our society tells us generally the first answer is medication.
Mhm.
And we're here saying, we want you to think about your diet. What if you try your diet first?
Mhm.
Let's try diet first. So, when it comes to keto, and when your clients, when you're getting them ready to start keto, is there any prep that you have to do leading up to it to kind of get ready for it?
Mhm. Yeah, and actually, before I forget, there's one thing that I do want to mention is that, if you're thinking about making a drastic change to your diet and you're taking any kind of medication, it's really important to talk to your doctor, especially things like SSRIs, which are used commonly in depression, but sometimes in ADHD as well, to help people, kind of stabilize a little. Because if you do this diet and it starts making big changes in your body, what can happen is your medication can almost become like extra strong. It can become
Mhm.
potentiated. And so then what happens is you start getting these bad side effects. And you think, oh, it's this diet. Well, it's not. The diet's actually working. It's working so well that your medication's now like overtime, working overtime. So it's important if you're on any kind of medication to definitely talk to your doctor and say, hey, I'm trying this out. Can you tell me what to look out for? Can you, and you need to be in contact with your doctor. If you have one of
For
those
sure.
doctors you never talk to, you might need to get a new doctor.
Make a call.
um, yeah. Yeah. So in terms of prep, so this is interesting. It really depends on your style. So I'm one of those like all or nothing people. And I was like, let's
I'm
go
the same
keto.
way.
And I did it. And that's the same when I went vegan when I was younger and I read something in a book and I was like, I'm going vegan. And the next day I was vegan. But in terms of prep, there are different ways you can do it. If you are really the kind of all or nothing and you want to just rip the band-aid off type, you can do that. And, if you're doing it on your own, you'll, look up the information and stuff, or you can work with somebody who's, a specialist in this and they can tell you, listen, this is what you need to do. This is how you're going to track what you're eating and good luck and let's see how it goes. Another idea would be to begin reducing your amount of carbohydrates. So just look at the amount of carbohydrates. And so, if you measure how much you're eating and you're eating like 300 grams of carbohydrates in a day, then okay, you're probably having some problems
That's
in
gonna
your,
be a
life.
drastic change. Yeah, that would be
Mhm.
your body would be like, "Hold on."
Mhm. And so you might want to just start cutting it down, 200 grams a day, 150, and figuring out the timeline. You can work with a specialist to help you as well, or make your own timeline. And you can do it like that. So just focusing on the carbs, and then, gradually ramping up the fat and keeping the protein at this kind of around 15%, I would recommend. Um, this is not, personalized medical advice. We got to add that little disclaimer. This is just kind of the general guidelines that
Mhm.
I would recommend to somebody would be about 15% calories from protein. Um, Another option, and this is what a lot of dietary specialists do, the functional therapeutic diet specialists do, is they'll do something like Whole30 or Paleo as a starting point. And go
Will
ahead.
you explain the difference between keto and paleo? Because I
Yes.
feel like they're very similar, but different.
Yeah, they are really similar. And I will tell you that. And I have to write everything down because I forget. But let's see. But just to finish that one thing, you can sometimes do a Whole30 or paleo diet, and sometimes that's enough, as you know.
Mhm.
So that is what a lot of people do with their clients. They'll say, "Hey, start with paleo, um, and then see what happens." And sometimes they're like, "Hey, I'm good. I'm good." They're like, "Okay, well then stay with that." Or sometimes it's like, okay, now let's go one step further and let's do an actual ketogenic diet. So the difference between keto and paleo is that keto is very, very focused on the macronutrient ratios because we're really trying to mimic fasting or ancestral diet, however you want to look at it, in the body.
Okay.
And we're really trying to avoid having this excess of carbs. So that's really, the main thing is not to have this excess of carbs. So keto, we're really trying to hit these ratios. It could be 80, 15, 5, whatever ratio you decide. Whereas paleo, it's more just about don't eat anything that you couldn't get pre-farm, basically before farms existed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the reason that paleo sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Because if your problem was one of these like junky things, if it was the junk, then paleo is going to take care of that for you, or Whole30 is going to take care of that for you. Um, if the problem was really more of an excess of carbohydrate, then keto is gonna help you because sometimes it's one,
Okay.
sometimes it's both. you know. Um, so that's kind of the difference between the two. So paleo, there's no like have to do this with the carbs and this. It's just really you need to eat like caveman style food.
It's different types
um,
of foods, and keto's more tracking what you eat, like
mhm.
tracking your levels and things like that.
Tracking the macros, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I would definitely recommend that if you're doing keto, you try to do as many, whole foods as possible, not the keto granola bar BS. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Okay, you're hitting your ratios, but like, what is that?
But
Like,
what's
what are you
in that
eating?
food that you're eating? Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, the standard advice, anything with a really long label that you're like, what? That's probably not going to be
That
healthy.
is probably the number one thing that Whole30 that I took away from it even after I ended was learning to read your labels. Understanding what is in the food you eat was massive for me because I had no idea. My coffee creamer had vegetable oil in it, had like seed oils in it, had like so many ingredients that were this long that I had no idea how to pronounce. And I'm like, I drink this every single morning, sometimes twice a day. Like,
Yeah.
and that was just one thing, and it was mind-blowing to me. And I think that that is a huge thing that maybe is a great first step, is to just learn to be cognizant of the ingredients that you're putting into your body, because that's a
Mhm.
huge, and it also just teaches you a ton about nutrition in general, just being aware of what's going on.
Totally.
When I've heard about keto, I've heard about ketosis. What
Mhm.
is ketosis? I've heard that it's like the state that you're trying to be in keto. What does that mean?
So ketosis, it's interesting. When we're born, we're in a ketotic state. So we're born in keto. So
Did not
anyone
know
that's
that.
yeah. So anyone that's like, I want to try keto, I'm like, you already tried it. So now just do it again. Yeah, we're born in a ketotic state. If you look at the macronutrients of breast milk, it does have a little bit more sugar than we would have on keto, but babies are growing so fast that they kind of burn it off. You got to think about it. Okay, why are babies in this state? Well, it's a perfect state for the brain. The brain loves it, and babies are like trying to grow this big old brain. And so nature is like, yeah, that's what you need. Ding. um,
Interesting.
yeah, and so there are two forms of fuel that we can use. There's glucose and there are ketones. And so if you're only eating carbs, or mostly eating carbs, you're going to be basically a sugar burner. And most people are. Most people are like that. I've heard statistics saying about 88% of Americans are what's called metabolically inflexible. So they can only rely on sugar. Um, you
Ooh.
know, and sugar means, sugar, starch, all this stuff. Like they're using that as their preferred fuel source. And so when you're a sugar burner, what tends to happen? If it's time for lunch, it's time for lunch. You know what I mean? And you're snacking and you're doing all this stuff, and you're just kind of, I don't know. And in my case, because I was a big
I
old
was
sugar
about to
burner.
say, I feel like you're describing me.
I feel called out. Okay, well, so it's this real dependence on carbohydrates for your main energy source. Um, Whereas when you're on a ketogenic diet, you might have a little bit of carb in your diet, but you're mainly burning ketones, which are made in the liver. They're usually made from fat. It can be, fat in the stick of butter you eat. It could be fat in, my arms are kind of skinny now, but pretend my arms are fat. It could be this fat. um, so it comes from that. And it's really a very stable fuel. And the jury's still out, but many people are saying that it's our preferred fuel source. And we're seeing, evidence to suggest being in a more ketotic state can help with things like Alzheimer's. Um, there are case studies of it completely putting schizophrenia into remission.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there are some fascinating stories. If you look up a doctor by the name of Dr. Chris Palmer, he had a patient who was schizophrenic, severely schizophrenic. I don't know if there's this scale, but I would say, yeah, severely schizophrenic. Like, he was convinced he was being followed all the time, all this stuff. And he was also very, very overweight. And so he'd been working with a psychiatrist for forever, and, nothing was helping the schizophrenia, not even the medication, really. And so the doctor was like, well, you know what? I tried this diet to lose weight. Why don't we at least, get you to lose some weight? At least one thing will be going right. So I put him on the diet. Within 2 weeks, he was coming into the psychiatrist's office saying, you know what? I actually believe you. I think I am schizophrenic.
Wow.
Whereas before it was like, no, I'm right. You guys are the ones with the problem. And then, and then a few days later, maybe people actually aren't following me.
That's
Maybe
incredible.
Maybe I did make it. And this is somebody who had been struggling with this for decades.
Yeah, I mean,
His
that's one of
life.
the most major mental health disorders you can have.
And
That's
yeah.
wow.
Yeah,
That's
and I like
incredible.
to point that out. Yeah, but I like to point that out because when you're talking about things like depression and ADHD and stuff, it can be kind of like this kind of scale, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're
Very big
depressed.
gray area. Very
Yes.
big. Yeah.
Like you're depressed. Well, you'll be okay tomorrow. It's this kind of like meh.
Exactly.
But when you're actually seeing things, hearing, like that's a very kind of black or white
Mhm.
thing. So when somebody says that, that was resolved by a therapeutic diet, then people really start paying attention. They're like, okay, 'cause he can't fake that,
No, I mean that's incredible. I've never heard that before.
Hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a great book called Brain Energy by Dr. Chris Palmer. He's one of my gurus. I
I
love
will have to read
him.
that. I will have to read
Yeah.
that for sure. That's incredible. So, ketones are what we're trying to burn in the ketogenic diet.
Yeah, we want
Okay.
to have this alternate fuel source. And so, what the ultimate goal is to become metabolically flexible so that you're able to burn glucose or burn ketones, either one, no big deal, without,
Okay.
without freaking out. Like the sugar burners will freak out when there's not enough food because carbs, they just really, you can only use them to burn for energy or to store.
Okay.
Whereas protein and fat, you can make an eyeball out of that. You can make your brain out of that.
I've
You know,
never thought about it that way. That's okay. Okay.
you need it. You do not need carbohydrates in your diet. They are completely non-essential. And guess what? Give it a Google and see how much BS is online saying you need carbohydrate. No, you need glucose, yes, but you don't need to eat it. Your body will make it. There's a process called gluconeogenesis, and your body makes glucose because it is needed for some parts of the body and some processes, but your body makes it. You don't have to eat it.
See, that's what I'm talking about. These narratives that we've been told our entire lives that we just don't even know to question. We have been told the food pyramid from a young age. We learn that at such a young age and it just becomes our truth. That's
Yeah.
fascinating to me. So, this is a high fat diet.
Mhm.
So, what does that mean in terms of cholesterol? What does that mean? Can you do it for the long term or do you have to worry about your blood work? What does that look like?
Okay, so here's where this gets really interesting.
Okay.
And so here's the funny thing. If you really look at the studies on cholesterol and heart disease, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to think about why are we so worried about cholesterol? And it's because we're told it's going to give you heart disease, it's going to give you stroke, it's going to do all this. If you look at the studies, high LDL can actually be protective against all cause mortality. Believe it or not. And everyone listening to me is like, what? But that's not, already indoctrinated into this. But if you look up a doctor called Dr. Nadir Ali, he's one of my favorites. He's all over YouTube. He talks a lot about this. You can also look at Low Carb Down Under on YouTube, and they talk a lot about this, about how LDL, which is the so-called bad cholesterol, isn't really bad for you. However, you have to look at what happens. So normal, let's say normal LDL. Um, Most of it, guess where 80% of the LDL in your body comes from?
I have no idea.
You made it.
Oh,
You made it yourself because it's essential for survival. And I know that because I was vegan for forever. And if my body didn't make cholesterol, I was literally eating zero cholesterol, I would be dead. So my body made it. So, first of all, 80% of your cholesterol in your body is made by your body. Why would your body make something that would give it a stroke? First of all, let's think about that. Um,
true. Very true.
um, but there is a problem. There is a thing when LDL collides with a lot of sugar, that's when it gets damaged. And so it can be called glycated LDL. There's also a reaction that happens with fructose. So different reactions with different sugars. They damage the LDL particle. It makes it a little bit smaller, and the body doesn't really understand what to do with it. And that's when it can kind of, cause these problems. It can like lead to, damage in the arteries and consequently lead to arterial plaque and things like that.
Mhm.
I know I'm not doing the explanation the most justice, but it's just to give people this idea
I'm
if they've never heard of
understanding
it.
though. It's the simplified version.
Yeah, so no, let's say normal, just for lack of a better term, normal LDL is fine. It's when it's damaged. How does it get damaged? Excessive carb. basically.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, okay. So
Yeah.
that's why the levels matter. That's why the staying within the ratios matter, so that you, you keep the LDL and everything in the correct.
Well, here's the funny thing. A lot of people, when they go on a ketogenic diet, their total LDL goes way up. And their
Okay.
doctor freaks out because that's what the doctors are told this too. The number one prescribed drug in the world is statins, which lowers your LDL and can mess up your eyes and can give you diabetes, especially if you're a woman, and can give you muscle pain. And it's horrible. And we're going to see a class action lawsuit, the likes of which you've never seen. Just give it a few more years, I promise. So,
Scary.
yeah, it's super scary. And this is the number one prescribed drug in the world, and it doesn't help.
Big pharma
um,
for you right there.
yeah, so it doesn't help. And yeah. And yeah, come for me. I'm here in Colombia. Come at me. Come at me. um, so so where was I going with this? Yeah, so your total LDL will probably go up. So then what should you do? Should you freak out? No, you should look at all your numbers. You want to look at your triglycerides. Again, I'm not a doctor. You want to talk to a low carb doctor about this. Um, so you want to look at your triglycerides. You want to look at, if you're over 40, a coronary artery, what is it? Calcium, a CAC score, right? You want to get a
Mhm.
scan of your arteries to see what's actually going on. Because there have been a lot of reports of this, of people saying their doctor was like, oh my God, your LDL is like 300, you're going to die. And they're like, do a scan. They do the scan, the arteries are pristine, their CAC score is 0. So it's like, okay, like what's
Okay.
going on? So be prepared. It happened to me. I went to my doctor right after I lost the weight because I had had a vitamin B12 and vitamin D deficiency. Um, and I had gotten that tested. And so I went to the doctor to get it retested and see how I was doing. And she tested my cholesterol. She goes, you need to go to the nutritionist. Your LDL is really high. And I go, I just lost 50 pounds. Normally when you lose weight, your LDL just normally goes up. It's normal. And she's like, yeah, you need to go to the nutritionist. And I was like, but why? I was like, I sent her this like study and she's like, yeah, go to the nutritionist. I was like, okay, I didn't go. So that is something that, your doctors will freak out about, a lot of them, if they're not aware of this. And it's scary because, frankly, all this information that we've been told is really wrong. This whole idea that things like saturated fat and so on are bad for you, they come from this guy called Ansel Keys, who made them popular in the turn of the last century. And it was because our president Eisenhower had a heart attack, and so everyone was freaking out. And he came up with this hypothesis saying saturated fat's bad for you. So everyone started freaking out. His hypothesis was never proven. um, he did this study called the Seven Nations Study, and if you look at that, it plots like different countries versus their saturated fat intake, and they had adverse effects. You think, okay, he's right. No, he's not right, because there were 22 countries in the study, and he picked the 7 that proved his
22.
point. He picked the 7 that proved his point.
Sample size matters, people.
You can't just pick the ones you want. And so this went on to influence, U.S. nutrition policy and consequently
Yeah.
global nutrition policy. He was pushing something that was false. There's another study called the Minnesota Heart Study, which was supposed to look at this. Does this, saturated fat, cholesterol, what's going on? And they did the study. It was a huge study, expensive study, and then they never published the results. So they found one of the sons of the researchers years later, and they were like, by the way, do you know anything about this? And, he found the records, I think it was microfiche or something, dug it up. The study was completely inconclusive. It basically said that, like, no, you don't need to worry about all this, kind of saturated fat cholesterol thing it doesn't. And they were like, well, why didn't they publish it? And they said, well, because it didn't say what we wanted it to say.
And that's, unfortunately, that's such a common thing when it comes to the health field in general, because big pharma is such a player in it.
Mhm.
And the medications that treat these conditions that come from this narrative make a lot of money for a lot of people. So the idea that we can have control over our health and we can change it with the foods that we eat doesn't serve the larger agenda, one could say. And that's something that I feel like people, maybe need to be a little bit more aware of, is what the agenda is behind the narratives that are being pushed. And
Mhm.
that's a huge one. That's a
Yeah.
huge one. I think it's absolutely fascinating that it goes back that far about where
Mm.
this narrative came from and how we got to where we are today. That's so interesting to me because I'm a believer of all of those things that you just mentioned because that's what I've been told my entire life. And if I guess if you don't take the time to really dig in and do the research and sift through all of the noise, you might not, uncover that for yourself. And that's unfortunate.
Exactly. And if I had, if me of like a year and change ago had heard me now talking, they're like, you're crazy. I used to be vegan.
Yes.
Like, I was vegan most of my life. And my mom went on Atkins way back in the day. And I remember saying, like, no, you're going to die. Da, da. She lost all this weight. Her doctor was like, this is great. Whatever you're doing, do it. And then she goes, I'm on Atkins. He goes, oh, don't do that too long. It's like she just lost all the weight she wanted to lose, and her, blood pressure, whatever, everything, all of her numbers are getting much better, and you're telling her not to do it.
It's interesting,
um,
isn't it?
but I think, and I think we have to give doctors credit as well because, they're doing what they were taught.
For
Um,
sure.
One, so they're doing what they were taught in med school. And two, there's this idea of the kind of standard of care that they're expected to stick to. If they deviate from that, then they can, open themselves up to liability. So if they follow the guidelines, then they follow the guidelines. And you really can't say like, oh, you gave me a heart attack. Those are the guidelines. So I think doctors are also afraid, many doctors, not all, but some doctors are afraid to try something new, some of them. But then some of them are very frustrated because they're saying, man, I'm telling everybody eat less, move more, and it's not working. Yeah, because the calorie thing doesn't matter.
But that
So
we're all told it's all about how many calories you eat. You got to be
yeah.
in a calorie deficient in order to lose weight. Like that's what we're told over and over and over again. And that brings me to a point about keto being a potentially restrictive diet. So that's one of the reasons why I went with Whole30 because I have battled with eating disorder my entire adult life as since I was 16. And so every time I've done a restrictive type of diet or tried one, it has sent me into a spiral because it's just so easy. It's that slippery slope, right? And that's kind of why I went with Whole30 because it felt like it was more about just eating better foods. Is there anything that you can say about the aspect of keto being quote unquote restrictive?
Well, what I will say first of all is, if you have an eating disorder, you need to any kind of diet, you need to tread lightly. You
For
need a
sure.
little bit extra help, probably. You know what I mean? You need as much support as you can get. You probably don't want to try DIYing it, right? So whether that's having a therapist on board, having a nutritionist, whatever, you know what I mean? You know there's an issue, so you want to do it right, first of all. So that's the most important thing. Um, I'm not going to say, oh, don't worry, just go on keto, everything will be fine.
For
I'm not.
sure. For
I'm not
sure.
going to say that. And here's the thing: most dietitians and nutritionists will say, oh my God, you cannot do keto. That's restrictive, and that's going to send you over the edge. And I understand the logic, but here's the funny thing: we're seeing studies now that show that keto can be useful in binge eating disorder. Um, and we're starting to see people that have cured or that have put anorexia into remission with keto. I would say anorexia is still the one that makes people the most nervous,
Hmm.
right? So you definitely need to be working with a doctor, especially if you're severely underweight, to do that. But here's the kind of the theory behind it, and I'm interested to know what you think. But when you're eating these foods that your body actually recognizes as food, then a lot of the behaviors go away. Because if you think about some of the kind of junk foods, they almost function more like a drug than a food. Um, and so I know it's different for everyone, but when you're taking these, food-like substances out, there tends to be less of a roller coaster. And when you're getting real nutrients, that's also going to help as well. A lot of us are overfed and undernourished, or underfed and undernourished too.
For
But
sure.
what do you think? Because so the diet that you went on is not super restrictive,
No,
but
it's
somewhat.
not. It is somewhat restrictive. And the thing is like the scary part about eating disorders and any type of diet is just being overly conscious of what you're putting into your body in the first place. That's generally like the start of the spiral, is when you just start to focus too much on what you eat. I did find with Whole30 though, and I feel like keto would probably kind of have the same effect, is that the way that I started to feel mentally, emotionally, physically was so good that it offset the tendencies that tended to come with it. Whereas
Mhm.
other times it's been yo-yo diets that I've tried, the classics that you hear all
Mhm.
the time, and then you end up going like this and then you completely lose control of what you're doing. And there's no feel good moment when you're doing diets like that. You don't ever get to that point, right? You're just
Mhm.
constantly on this roller coaster that you can't get off of, and then the spiral is soon to follow. But with
Exactly.
Whole30, and like you're saying with keto, that you noticed the fog and all of the the vibration going on around, like all of that settled. And for me, it was my mood. I was just immediately, I was like, oh my God, what is happening? This is crazy. And it took all of the focus off of the food. It took all of the
Mhm.
focus off of the rituals and things like that that come along with it.
Mhm.
So I do think that that's really, really interesting. Again, the connection between gut and brain.
Mhm. And actually, it's interesting what you said. I just was looking at the time on my computer. It's right now where I am. It's 11:55 a.m. and I haven't eaten, and I forgot.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot
Mm-hmm.
to eat. And I'm gonna have a huge lunch. But at this moment I don't feel hungry. Whereas before I would have just been hungry all the time. So I think how that relates to eating disorders is that you just have less of this like mental, yeah,
Constant. Yes.
mental messaging about, hey, food, how about some food? How about some food? you know, um, and not to make light of it. I know it's very serious, but this you don't have this extra
It's
messaging.
constant,
Yeah.
100%. And what you were saying about living on carbs and the classic Snickers moment, right? When you're about to get hungry and you just lose it. So much of what you eat when you're in an eating disorder is junk to begin with because you feel like that's I don't even know the psychology behind that. But very rarely are you eating solid whole foods that are
Mm,
really really good for your body. And so that the moment that you said that, I was like, yeah, because the feeling feels so extreme in that
mm,
moment when you feel like I have to eat right now, like I'm getting mad or I'm getting sad or whatever it is. Then your whole moment becomes about food. Your whole mental space becomes about food, and then again, that's just that spiral that starts to happen. So the concept of being in a space where you don't get to that level of I'm so hungry, like I have to eat right now is super enticing to me. Like that's
mm,
something to me that makes me like, yeah, I might need to try this because that
mm.
is something that I feel heavily when
Okay.
I'm not conscious of the amount of sugar that I'm eating or carbs that are going into my body. Snickers moments, people have made that joke about me since I was yay high. Oh,
Mm,
Maddie, there she goes, another Snickers moment. I mean, I at one point thought that I had a glucose problem. Like I thought that my
mm.
blood sugar was like dropping because my everything about me would change. So that is one of the most interesting things about this so far to me. As a
Mm,
mhm.
yeah, and I think it's really. I mean, I definitely was a Snickers Snickers baby, and there's this cake here called chocoramo, and it's like a piece of cake with made of God knows what, covered in like a frosting. It comes in
Exactly.
a package. It's been on a shelf for like 5 years, so who knows what's in it. I used to every day go down to the store, get my chocoramo, and then eat it, and then have some coffee, which would make me kind of jittery. So I get another one. Like I would sometimes be on two or three of these a day, and just felt like out of control. Another thing that I like about keto in terms of the restrictiveness is that there's no real restriction of quantity.
I
Um,
love that. Okay.
yeah, yeah. The thing you're really paying attention to is the carbs. So yeah, you want to keep your carbs under a certain number. It depends. Really depends on the person, and that's something you can work through. Um, by reading books or by working with a therapist on this, but you're really working on restricting the carbs, and then protein you want to not restrict it, but you don't want to eat a ton of protein. You want to have it about
Okay.
15%, and then fat, you know and then eat as much as you want. And the thing that I really like about it is really they say eat until you're comfortably stuffed, um,
I like that.
which I do too. And it's really weird. When I started the diet, I never had this concept of true hunger and true satiety. Um, I would stop eating when my stomach hurt, like hurt.
Mhm.
I was like, "Oh, you're done."
You're like, I'm
And
uncomfortable,
yeah.
actually.
Yeah, and I never had true hunger, I just had cravings for everything. I want chocolate, I want this, I
Cravings,
want this, I don't
yes.
know. And then I remember, going into the diet after a short time, um, one day I was like, I'm hungry. What do I want? Anything." Like, literally, and I was like, Is this true hunger?"
Hey, this is what they talk about.
And so I was like, "Oh, okay, wow, I really could eat anything." And that's been great because, some people will say, "Oh, keto can be boring." It can be because, you don't have as much of you don't have your pasta and this, that, and the other. There's a little bit of a limitation to what kind of things and you can eat. And so some people say, "Oh, it's boring." But you know what is funny is that, yeah, maybe I eat pretty much the same thing every day, every week. Let's say every week I'm pretty much like doing the same kind of rotation, but I don't get bored of the food because I'm no longer like, I don't
It's
know how to
not all
describe it.
about food. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I'm not
not yeah.
craving things. I'm not like, "Oh, I
Mhm,
have to get Thai food today." Like, no, I just
mhm.
like want this food. And so, I've also heard it said that, some possible explanation for this is that if you are actually deficient in some nutrients, then that may be why you have this desire to have so much variety because your body's like, "Well, that didn't work. Try this, try this, try this, try this." You know
That's
what I
a
mean?
really interesting take on that, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could see that for sure. What kind of foods do you eat then? Like, what does a typical diet kinda look like food-wise?
So I eat a lot of red meat.
Okay,
I do
okay.
like the opposite of what we were taught to do.
Yes.
Most of my diet is red meat. I try to get fatty cuts of red meat if possible, but sometimes you can't. So, like for example, I really wanted hamburger the other day, and at the grocery store they had this like 93.7, right?
Mhm.
93 protein, 7 fat. So I made that. I made hamburgers out of that, and then I had butter on the side. I just had plain
Okay.
butter, which some people are going to think gross. Um, so sometimes I have plain butter, or sometimes I have brown butter. So I'll like brown the butter. So that would be an example. But you can also do it by adding in other things. Like you can have avocados, you can have salads. One thing that works really well is to just have a salad and use lots of oil on it. Is one way to do it. Um, you can have things like macadamia nuts have a lot of fat. So you're just trying to add in the fat. So if possible, base it around fatty cuts of meat and then try to add in fat, and then try to hit the ratios. But what I eat is lots of bacon almost every day. I eat
Love
a bunch of
bacon.
I eat a bunch of bacon and butter. I eat salads with lots of oil. I make fat bombs out of coconut oil and cacao
Ooh,
and
okay,
sweets. Yeah, and
okay.
so it's like chocolate, but it's not sweet. The first time you eat it, it's like, "Oh," but then you get used to it. So that's mostly what I eat.
I haven't heard you mention vegetables. Is
Yeah.
that part of the equation or no?
Yeah, yeah, it's really funny. So
Okay.
here comes the part where some people are gonna go, "Now she's really crazy." I I have come to believe that, the vegetables are not necessary, and this is from somebody who was a vegan and who grew up, in a household where we ate the Mediterranean diet a lot, 'cause
Okay.
have a Lebanese background, like I'm half Lebanese, half American. So we grew up eating salads, radishes, cucumber. Just the table has to be covered with vegetables, or it's a
Mhm.
bad Lebanese meal. Um, so, so I grew up eating all these things. But when I started looking into it, when I started looking into keto, I ate tons and tons of vegetables at the beginning, and then I kept running across all these carnivore people, and I was like, "This is crazy. You have to have
I've heard
vegetables."
of the yes, I've heard of the carnivore diet, yes, and it does feel extreme.
Yeah, and I was like, "That's great. Everyone knows you have to have vegetables. Everyone knows you have to have
Yes.
fiber." Da, 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 da. And when I started looking into it, I was like, "You know what? If you think about it," and the way I answer most questions for myself is like, "Well, what happened, back in the day before we had all this modern stuff? If you lived in a cold place, and back in the day we did, um, what vegetables were you eating year round? What fruits
None.
were you eating year round?"
Yeah, they didn't grow.
So this idea that you have to have fruits and vegetables every single day, for me, it doesn't track, you know. And there are people that are doing carnivore and thriving. So I'm not carnivore. I have carnivore days where I don't have any vegetables, and I really just am having animal products like beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. Um, but what's worked out for me that I really love is that I no longer focus on getting so many vegetables. And as you know, I'm one of those people with ADHD that likes to cook, but I'm rare. Um, a lot of people with ADHD are like, I don't want to cook. There's so many
Mhm.
steps. And then if I get distracted, it's going to burn and I don't want to clean up. And oh my God. So I get it. A lot of people really don't want to cook, but I would say, hey, if you are doing keto, you don't have to go crazy with the vegetables because those are the things that go bad in the fridge. And it's a lot of extra work cutting up all that stuff. So I would say eat the vegetables that you feel like eating, that you tolerate well, and don't worry about it because you really can get pretty much everything you need from fatty cuts of red meat.
Interesting. Okay. I feel like this is a good segue into
Mm.
the vegan topic.
Uh,
So, how did we make this shift from vegan to fatty red meat?
I know, right? I've never been like a person that wasn't into extremes. But no, so I started vegan when I was really young. I think I was in middle school. I was about 11 or 12, and I was doing a project on animal experimentation, for makeup and stuff. And I read the chapter on farming, and I went, oh no, factory farming, terrible. Oh my God, I'm not doing this ever again.
Yes.
Stopped completely eating. But I was a real vegan. There are a lot of people that are like, I'm vegan. I'm like, you're not vegan. I had no meat, no milk, no honey. I didn't wear silk. I didn't wear
No
wool.
byproducts at
I
all.
didn't wear leather. I always had blisters on my feet. like nothing, nothing, nothing. And also in the first, couple of weeks, I had read that you weren't allowed to have sugar either. And so I cut out all that crap. So in the first few weeks, I felt amazing. And so
Mhm.
there was my data. So I was like, oh, the secret
This is it.
is be vegan. And I think that happens to a lot of vegans too, when they first convert, because usually they're cutting out a lot of crap. And it's like, it's not the meat, it was the crap, you know?
Yes.
But they cut out the meat and the crap. And they're like, oh, I'm great. He's like, yeah, it's because of the
Mhm.
crap. But I can't judge you because I was you. so,
For sure.
so I did that for years. Let's see, I was about, 12 or so. And I stopped when I was about 24, 25. Is when I stopped being full on vegan because I was just like, there's so many people in the world. I'm not really making a difference. I'm going to McDonald's. I went to McDonald's.
I feel that statement. I do.
But then I was like flexitarian. Like I
Okay.
would eat meat once a week. And this continued from age about 24 until very recently, until about age 40, 41. And suddenly I thought I was going through menopause. Like I was getting all these symptoms. And so I went to a doctor and she was like, let's do some tests. And she was like, you're extremely low in vitamin B12 and extremely low in vitamin D. She's like,
Mhm.
I'm surprised you're even talking. You must be really smart. I was like, what?
I've heard that about B12. I've heard B12 has some really crazy side effects sometimes. Lack
Mm,
of, at least.
yeah, yeah, for sure. It's an essential nutrient. And so my doctor was at the time was vegan, and so she was like, "Oh yeah, do this, do this, do this, do this." And I take 60 supplements a day, and I was like, oh, 60 supplements a day. My God,
You're like, why do you need to take 60 supplements a day?
what the hell? I take one. I take iodine. That's all I take.
Mhm. That's also
Now
so
because
expensive. Supplements? 60
oh yeah, it's
supplements? That's
expensive.
so expensive.
And who like I hate swallowing pills. Like I can't. I put like a couple drops of iodine. If anyone's starting keto, I recommend electrolytes. But that's it. None of this. It needs to be in your food. Like what's going on? Um, so anyway, so yeah, I went into the keto thing still being not like kind of my flexitarian self, still having tons of vegetables, these huge salads, grilling the vegetables. And actually, that kind of made the transition a little bit easier because I was eating a lot and I decided I wasn't going to count the carbs in my vegetables. Which for mental health, I would say your mileage may vary. You may need to be stricter if we're trying to
Mhm.
get a therapeutic effect. But I was just trying to look good in crop top, so I didn't think about it. So I did start with lots of vegetables, and then as I started hearing all these carnivore people, I was like, these crazy carnivore people. But then I was like, you know what? This makes sense. This really makes sense. So that's how I came to where I am now, which I guess you could call ketovore. So it's like not carnivore, it's keto, but not that many vegetables. Some days I don't have any, and some days I have a few if I'm in the mood.
That is okay. Okay, I've heard this before. I have a friend that eats a very similar diet to you, and so I would say definitely venturing more towards the carnivore side. At least as last I heard. But there were rumblings of this same narrative, and I find it very interesting because I had not dove this deep into it. So, can vegans do keto?
You can, they can, yeah.
Oh, they
There,
can.
yeah. There's a thing called vegan keto, It's hard, but it's doable. It's really and I'm not an expert on it because I haven't done it, but
For sure.
you're going to be looking at adding lots of oils and fats into your meal, and you're going to need to get protein from vegetable sources. So it's definitely doable.
You just said get a vitamin panel, right? Is there blood work or something like that that you should be doing kind of regularly when you're doing a diet like this?
I don't think it's necessary
Okay.
because, at the end of the day, going back to like my core principle, cavemen didn't have blood work,
True.
um, so I don't think I'm not going to say it's necessary. You have to do it in order to do the diet, but I would just follow the general guidelines. Talk to your doctor and ask them to give you, your standard kind of panel. I'm not going to say like specifically which ones,
Yeah.
but get your standard panel. Usually, the B vitamins are always important. Vitamin D is a big one that we see a lot of problems with. And keeping in mind that there are some deficiencies that will not necessarily show up in tests like magnesium. There's no real good test right now that's commonly available. So, in lieu of getting all these tests, I would say the first thing you should do is be using a tracking app like Chronometer is my favorite
Chronometer. Okay.
Chronometer, and they have a free version too. Use a tracking app like Chronometer to see what your vitamin situation is in the food that you're eating. And then get your standard vitamin panels. If you are getting regular checkups at your doctor, which you should be,
Yeah.
get your standard kind of vitamin panel. They'll know which ones to tell you to look for.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I feel like we've heard a lot of really, really positive, potential side effects from the keto diet. Are there any negatives that we could talk about? Are there any negatives or things that may happen from this diet potentially?
Yeah, so there are a few. So the one that when you Google it, like it's really funny because they really blow it out of proportion. They're like, you might get the keto flu.
I've heard of that. I've heard of that before. I have.
Yeah, and it's a real thing. I was lucky I didn't get the keto flu because I had already been intermittent fasting beforehand. And I think that smoothed my transition a little. The keto flu is basically your body switching from being a sugar burner to a carb burner because, once you got off of, breast milk or, baby formula, hopefully it was the right macronutrient ratio. Once you, became a non-baby,
A
you were
non-baby.
you were probably, depending on where you grew up, you were probably eating a ton of carbs. So you've been a sugar burner most of your life, and then all of a sudden you're telling your body, no, time to do this other thing. And sometimes the body's like, I don't know how to do that. so
Mhm.
so it takes a little while. It's hard to put an exact number on it, but for most people, it's about 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
It's kind of this adjustment period. And so, let's say usually between week 1 and week 2, you might see these symptoms, and you can have flu-like symptoms. You can actually have a runny nose. You can have a headache. You might feel really tired. It's similar to the quitter's flu. Anybody who's a smoker or former smoker has probably heard of the quitter's flu. So it's your body ridding itself of an addictive substance, basically.
They warn you of the same thing when you do Whole 30. So the Whole
Okay.
30 book has a whole section on it, and it's like I just want to let you know that week 2 and 3 you could feel really, really bad. So it's kind of the same thing. It's when you get rid, your body has to readjust. It's so used to one status quo, and then it has to learn to run on different fuel.
Mhm.
So it sounds like that may just kind of be a normal side effect of major changes in your body.
Mhm. Yeah, and so we don't know. It
Okay.
could be Whole30 is probably a little bit more of like a detoxification and a reduction of
Yes.
inflammation.
Yes.
Yeah, and so in keto, there's probably some of that going on depending how clean your keto is. But it's also this like switching to a new fuel of like, oh my gosh, there's no more sugar. What else? What else you got? And so there are ways to mitigate that. The most important thing is to make sure you have enough electrolytes. Um, so that's something to look into. Make sure you have enough electrolytes. And that's why I tried Atkins like 20 years ago and I didn't know about electrolytes and I failed. And I was like, this is impossible. I don't want to do this. so, and it's because I didn't know about electrolytes. When I knew about electrolytes, it was much easier. So electrolytes will help you with that. And knowing that this is something that could happen because a lot of people that I talk to, that I just meet here and there, I'll mention that this is what I do. And they're like, oh, I tried that diet. It didn't work. So, oh, how long were you on it? It's always the same answer, 2 weeks. I said, it was just about the
Till it
work.
until it got tough. Yeah, you have to get over the hump. We have to get over the hump, people.
It was just about to work. No. And so this is what I really like about this diet is if you think about other diets, like a calorie restriction diet, like you start the calorie restriction diet and you're like, yeah, I'm doing great. Nah, nah,
Mhm.
nah. And then it gets harder and harder until you're like, I'm starving. Right.
Literally.
Whereas keto, yeah. Whereas keto is like, oh my God. Oh no, I'm fine.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So
So
keto flu. It may or may not happen, but go ahead and prepare yourself that
yeah.
it could hood.
Yeah. And so you got to think strategically about it. If you're getting married in a week, don't start keto.
Don't do that to
Yeah.
yourself. You'll hate it. You'll
Yeah.
never do it again.
If you're running a marathon on Friday, do not start keto.
Yes.
Run the
Yes.
marathon first, and then we'll
Yes.
talk. you
Yes.
know, if you're about to go to like if it's your birthday tomorrow, maybe don't start. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like maybe do it, soon, but be conscious of what's coming up in the next couple of weeks for you because this is a real thing. If you're starting a new job, maybe give it a couple of weeks and any of those things. It's important to be realistic. If you want to muscle through it, fine, but if not, like let's make it as easy as possible. So you
Mhm.
have your whole life to do this
That
diet.
makes
There's
sense.
there's no rush. Um, and so that's one of the side effects. Another like a negative that I would say is the cost. So um it depends, where you live, what you do, and that kind of thing. But if you go to a restaurant, in most places, it's going to be filled with a lot of stuff like cheap stuff, like potatoes, or rice or pasta or bread, all this kind of extra stuff. And you look at like the meal and you think, oh, that's not so expensive. But then when you look at the part that actually has nutrition in it, you're like, oh, it's like this big. so I have noticed, I'll go to restaurants and I'll get a a platter of like meat for two for me.
Okay.
so
Okay.
so I will wind up spending a little bit more money if I go to restaurants. The way I get around that is I cook most of my own food. Um, and so at the grocery store, it doesn't come out to be as expensive, I don't think, as in restaurants, because I'm mainly eating meat, some vegetables, and, adding fats in there. But it can be something to keep an eye on, So if you're on a budget, there's a way to do it. Um, which brings up another point. A lot of people say you have to get grass fed, grass finished, blah, 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 blah. No, you don't. There have been studies comparing what actually happens in the person and the difference between grass fed and the grain finished, because all cows are grass fed until the end, then they finish some of
Mhm.
them with grain because they can't live more than a couple months on grain because grain is not what they eat. They eat grass.
Mhm.
So these cows that have been fed grain in the end of their life, these kind of grain finished cows, there's no difference in the people that eat the one
Okay.
versus the other. So yeah, if you're looking at this from an ethical standpoint and this is important to you to have pasture fed, pasture raised beef, then yeah, of course you're going to go for that. If you're on a budget and this is the best you can do the best you can with what you got. And don't
Mhm.
worry about getting the fancy this, the that, the other. Um, for your, does it need to be organic? For meat, you're not going to see as much of a difference. You're going to see more of that in vegetables because you're going to have the actual,
That makes
fed
sense.
stuff on the vegetables. And whereas the meat, like it's gone through an animal's body, like the animal's done its best to rid itself of the toxins, before it gets to you. But it can be a little expensive because, beans and rice are super, super cheap, but eventually you're going to be hungry.
No, that makes sense. Okay, so
So,
two things to consider there. I think one of my last questions, and I've thought
mm,
this sometimes about keto, is can you cheat? Does it ruin the whole
mm.
thing if you cheat? Do you have to start all over? Have you ruined your levels? What can you cheat?
Right, that's a really good question, actually. So, you can do whatever you want, but
Yeah.
um, I would say, it's one of these diets that you want to try to be pretty good, you know, simply because it's a diet that's based on being in this certain metabolic state.
Yes. Hmm.
So we want to try to be in that state. You don't have to be in it constantly. You might have, some like berries or something, and you might get knocked out of it a little. But we want to try to be in somewhat of a ketotic state most of the time. So if you really go on a bender, we're talking pasta, birthday
Yes.
cake, beer, like all that stuff, you could be out of ketosis for several days. And you might feel crappy. So
Okay.
that's no fun. Um, you know, is it going to ruin everything? No. You're just going to, you're going to have a few days where you don't feel so great,
You're
probably.
gonna have to recover.
Yeah. Yeah. So to have
is
this kind of,
is the bender worth it? Yes or no? That's what you've got to ask yourself. Is the cheat worth it?
exactly. So something that works for me actually is I have my cheats, but my cheats are actually within the ketogenic diet
Okay.
framework. So what that means is normally I don't have any fruit, but sometimes I'll get some berries. And since I don't have any fruit, when I get the berries, it's like it's
This
like
is your treat.
amazing.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
because I don't have any sugar or anything. So now my palate is really sensitive, and a blueberry tastes like Snickers now. So
I love that. Yeah.
and so that's what I do, and that kind of gives me this like cheat feeling without
Mhm.
really cheating because berries, some people say no berries, but they more or less fit within keto as long as you're not binging on them. So that's what I do. I have these like um, cheats that aren't really cheats, I would say. But yeah, I mean, it depends who you talk to, but there are people that will say, no, I go to dinner and I eat what I want and then I go back into it. And that's fine. You can do that too. I would say, in the beginning, I would be happy if you were as strict as possible
Mhm.
because I'm trying to get you into that metabolically flexible point. And
Mhm.
so once you're flexible, metabolically flexible, then your body doesn't freak out as much, but it's still not going to be super happy with your cheats. So
That
you
makes
can,
sense.
you can have the piece of bread and then go back. I personally, believe it or not, and I, when I learned what a carbohydrate was in grade school, I made a song about carbs. That's how much I love carbs. Okay. So I'm like, I was like Miss Carb Queen and
Mhm.
I really don't miss it anymore. I never thought I would say those words, but I
Yeah.
really, I
Okay,
really
that's
don't
I
miss
mean,
it.
that's good to know. That's really good to know.
Yeah, so
Well,
I miss it.
this was super informative. I feel like I learned a ton.
Oh, great.
I feel like I've heard so much about this
Mhm.
in my peripherals and I've never really super deep dived into it. And so this is so interesting to me. It sounds doable as long as the commitment is there. And again, I just can't stress enough the connection between your gut and your brain and what that can do for your life. So, again, I do want to put that disclaimer out that we are not doctors. This is not medical advice. Please be sure to speak to your doctor before you make any types of major diet changes or fluctuations, especially if you are on medication. So definitely want to re-put that disclaimer out there. Julie, is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Um, well, actually, we might have to do another episode
Yeah,
because
this was awesome. I enjoyed this so much.
okay, good. Because something we didn't talk about, but it's a complicated topic, is the various mechanisms by which diets like Whole30, Paleo,
Mhm.
Keto, and Carnivore work. So we're gonna have to do another episode
No,
about that.
I want to do another episode about that because there are so many diets out there in the world and so I feel like it's hard to differentiate or figure out what's best for you. So, I think that would be a really good episode in and of
Mhm.
itself. But
Yeah, talk about why it works. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Why it works, how, yeah, what's going on. This was awesome though. Learned a ton. I feel like everyone's gonna really, really love this. And
Cool.
again, Julie Saad, thank you so much for joining me today. And I will have her website linked in the description. Feel free to check her out. And we will see you back on Do the Work
Yay.
for sure. Yes, most
Awesome.
definitely. Thank you guys so much for coming today. And we will see you back next week.
Thanks.